Alright, ladies and gentlemen, now I apologize for just getting up a little bit later than the previous podcast review of The Walking Dead. That is due to the fact that I was working this evening. I was able to catch the 12 o'clock repeat, and by the time I recorded this, I'm planning on going straight to sleep, so I'll be rendering this tomorrow. So I do apologize for the delay on that. Hey, life interferes. But let's get into the actual episode, shall we? So we've got second episode of season 2. Um, Before I get into anything else, I'll talk about what there wasn't in this episode, and there wasn't really anything with Michelle or Andrea, which I was somewhat surprised by. I figured they'd at least have, you know, a scene or two of them walking around. They seem oddly out of place by not referencing them. I mean, I kind of get it; it would be distracting, but sometimes with TV shows like this, you kind of need to remind characters that, hey, or not characters, but the audience that, hey, there is a B plot going on. So it would have been nice to just have like a quick scene. Although they did throw a lot of stuff in this episode, so again, I see why they weren't in there. And speaking of that lot of stuff, there's a lot of small character moments in mixed in with the big stuff. Now, of course, we have, and I'll give actually before I get into anything, I have to give the formal spoiler warning. From here on out, we are assuming, I am assuming, that you have seen this episode, that you've watched it, and that's why you're watching this. So, or you haven't seen the episode and you just want to find out what happened. Okay, that works too. But you have been, the spoil warning has been given, or spoiler warning. Well, let's start with the big stuff. We have the group of prisoners. They have their little tension. Oh, we're gonna they make the deal to clear out the one cell block, which I kind of always figured, weren't you planning on clearing out all these cell blocks eventually anyway? I mean, you kind of want the entire prison secure for your long-term plans. So does that mean there's other cell blocks that are still full of infected? You probably want to clear them out. I mean, the big thing I always figure with them is what the way they kind of go through room by room. You figure the way you'd want to get these walkers is you'd get a secured area within the cell block, and like take one of those corridors, fortify it, or just close one of the cage doors, and just make a ton of noise to attract the walkers, and just kill them very easily as they come up to the bars, and you just stab through as they've been showing very effectively. That's really and then after you've tried that for about an hour, maybe two, that you're pretty certain that most of the walkers that at least can possibly hear have attempted an attack. Then you can carefully go through the halls, checking it one by one. Again, this is something that it's not very cinematic, but it's damn effective to do. Although I do like how they kind of show the distinction between these two groups. That you have the prisoners when they're told to talk, they try to tell them how they have to fight the walkers, and then they immediately have them go at it, and they're hitting these guys like they're in a riot. They're kicking them in the stomach, and I think that should have really been the scene where one of the prisoners got killed. I mean, we had Big Tiny there. He got the fucking claw from Dead Island from that. I forget what the sub zombie type was from that, but he had the fucking bone claw. That really should have been, I think, in the scene that they were having the prison riot style attack, where you got Rick, Daryl, and T-Dog just sitting there just sitting back. I think there's actually a bit of the moment where Rick is kind of hoping that the zombies just kill these guys right here, because it solves killing two birds with one stone. They're killing a couple of these zombies that they're gonna have to kill anyway, and the prisoners get themselves killed. Very morally relieving. Oh, well, we tried to help these guys out, they wouldn't listen, and they got themselves killed. Tough luck. So I think it should have been. It would have been nice if they had that, where the zombies actually killed one of these guys, because they're just saying, oh, they know how to kill people and all this. Although I will say this, the only thing that's really hard to stretch is that they were sitting in that cafeteria area for 10 months and they're still like, oh, we were waiting for the army to show up any day now. And you're like, really? After 10 months? After 10 months, you should have assumed the place was abandoned. Or you should have assumed that, at the very least, you would have assumed that you were, like, left for quarantine. These guys are just still sitting in there, not even I mean, they make some references that they've attempted to escape, but really? I mean, you haven't poked your head out at all? You haven't encountered some more of these, the walkers? Really? I mean, if it was a month or two, or even 3, you could maybe kind of buy it, but when you're pushing on a year, it's like, it kind of is, it's a bit stretching. Again, I think that's partially to blame for the time jump that they did between seasons 2 and 3. If this had kind of flowed where this was just a week after the farm, I think it would be more believable. Again, though, they have for really the time jump, like I said, was mainly for Carl, so that they can show a little bit more of his aging in there. Speaking of Carl, because I think this really kind of got jumped over in the episode, but it's interesting to see how he kind of does this completely off screen. He runs off to the infirmary and gets his equipment, and you're seeing the conflict that he's having kind of with Laurie not treating him as an adult, but him really kind of acting a little too foolhardy. I mean, as much as we all hate Laurie at this point, which I'll get into in a second, we really don't, like, she makes a very good point. Hershel's in this situation, and he was with the entire group. And so it's like one of those where it's like, she is kind of babying him, yes, and he's trying to show that he's a man, but in this particular instance, she's right. And by the end of the episode, she's kind of acknowledged that, she wanted to say, Carl can play, but she's kind of realized that he is no longer a child that has the innocence of childhood anymore. He is somewhat of an experienced killer. He even said, he just took out 2 walkers on his way to the infirmary. No big deal. And from the first episode this season, we know he now very effectively can take out a walker. So it's an interesting character development, and they kind of jump over that quickly. I think we're going to see more of that develop as the season progresses. Probably more like in the 4th episode, I think. Just because next episode looks more like it's going to finally reveal the governor, and I suspect after that we'll get a more of a character development as they really start to develop the prison and their lifestyle. And I have a feeling we'll have more of a character-centric episode. Kind of like how we used to have some of the episodes on the farm, where it was primarily them just kind of sitting and talking, getting our character moments in, which is key. I mean, I'm very happy for the amount of zombie violence we have in this episode, in this season, and I think it's really the thing that drives the show. But occasionally, step back, relax, have a character-centric episode. Not too many. That was Battlestar Galactica's problem. They had way too much character. It was way too much talking. They didn't do enough action. That's really where the show began to drag and became truly a soap opera, and I think was starting to lose people. I hope this doesn't go down that path, which I think some people were getting a little nervous about in season 2. Though I think that partially can be blamed on the budget fights. I think by now AMC has realized, that The Walking Dead is such a cash cow that it's basically has a blank check. It doesn't have to worry. And I think now Mad Men gets awards and stuff, it's loved, but I think now it's such a moneymaker, it's so popular, it blows Mad Men out of the water. In terms of ratings and ratings in the key demographics, that it's going to win. And rightfully so. I mean, it's a very well-written show as well. But I digress. We digress severely. I haven't finished talking about The Prisoners. So that was nice to see The Prisoners have that kind of moment where they're not used to fighting it. Again, it was a bit of a suspension of disbelief breaker, the length of time and their inexperience and not knowing what the walkers are. But still, um, as for the prisoners themselves, a couple of them die off without having really any characters. Uh, we have Tomas, who's the only guy that really has character at this point in time, and he's dead, rightfully so. And I want to take this time to talk about that particular character. Um, you have Tomas as almost like the stereotypical alpha male prisoner who's kind of extremely violent, probably gang related, in there for very violent crimes. And as you kind of see, he's dominated this group of prisoners. And he's got some real, unlike maybe some of the other prisoners, he's probably in there for doing some real bad things, and he's probably somewhat sociopathic. Takes a bit. It looks like he kind of really enjoyed when he gets an opportunity to kill, enjoys it. So you can see why he really is a threat to the group. He's kind of like that. He's the guy that really probably does belong in prison. Yes, in some ways he would probably be great in the zombie apocalypse for survival, but not survival with other people. At least not survive. He would be probably almost like not even like the governor. Well, I guess we have to actually see how he's done in this series. But he wouldn't be very. You wouldn't want to be under his group because he'd be very ruthless, a little too ruthless, a little too probably self-centric. And it's good though that he's kind of. It's very good that they do kind of show and demonstrate how these guys are not aware of the changes that have occurred. I mean, not only that they have the scene where they kind of go, why don't you take that guy to a hospital? It's like, there are no hospitals, there are no army, there's no government, there's nothing, there's no cell phones. Takes them a little while, and I think that's very well written. When they kind of learn that everything's destroyed, it's like, you have a cell phone, I need to call my family and see if they're doing well. He's like, you don't get it, there's not even cell phones, and that's something that I think in that type of situation, a lot of people it wouldn't necessarily cross their mind quickly that things are collapsing. I need to contact them, but there's not even any means to contact people anymore. And there's a real isolation, in them not realizing how things have changed. And there's a nice little scene where kind of Tomas kind of sees. Actually, it's when he kills Big Tiny there. He sees Rick's hesitation. He kind of knows what type of a man Rick is. And that's why he decides that he's going to try to get Rick killed. He kind of knows he's the alpha dog, but he's one of these moral guys. He could probably take him out. What he doesn't realize, though, he kind of uses as a slight trick. Oh, I almost accidentally kill him. He tries to do these kind of things that would probably work before, where people would normally hesitate, not realizing that people like Rick, people have adapted to this world and they're not going to take that type of crap. They see what's going on, and people have learned to survive, including people that would not be what he would think of as survivors, or at least from Tomas's point of view. So it's an interesting demonstration of how a character like that has problems because they've been isolated and they're operating under the old world's rules, where certain individuals, they would naturally, oh, we were in a situation, I slung close, so I didn't quite hit you, so, you're not going to accuse me of trying to murder you or do anything. Yeah, or, this Walker was on me, so I had to push him away and it happened to land on you. You can't do that in this type of world, because people like Rick, who probably in regular life would be distrusting but wouldn't act on that distrust, are just going to plain outright kill you. And they're a lot better at killing than you. I mean, you see Tomas, he's a killer, yes, but he's not a very efficient killer. He takes too much pleasure in it. You've got people like the true group of survivors here who are extremely efficient at taking out the walkers now, who don't joke around. They're not, they're killing for survival, pure and simple. So it's quick, efficient, do it and done. Where you have Tomas is more of a message sending killing, or there's the killings a means to another end, whether it's through message sending or it's through, you know, personal satisfaction. So it's not efficient. And I probably talked way too much about that. In essence, I would compare Tomas almost to Saddam Hussein, a guy who figures out the world and figures how to manipulate global systems, but doesn't, or I guess we should use the past case in both cases, blah, 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 who doesn't realize when the world changes, when there's a global paradigm shift, and who then gets stuck kind of committing the same kind of manipulations in a world where that doesn't work anymore. You know, you had that happen with Saddam twice. You know, first time when he tried to play old Cold War politics when the Cold War was over, and then he kind of got stuck in his own lies a bit after 9/11. But I know that's kind of getting into the political field. But he kind of made those same mistakes, and I think it's a very interesting comparison. As for the other two prisoners, probably the one prisoner. I think his name was either Andra or Andrew. That's probably one of the more interesting kills. Is he doesn't look like he necessarily had anything to do with Tomas trying to kill off Rick, and yet Rick reacts the same, kind of sees him, aims at him. Maybe there's a little subtle racism there. Maybe. I don't see why he kind of went straight for him. Maybe it was just his reaction running away, and this is kind of, you know, the classic problem a lot of people run into. They see the cops, they run to the cop, and because the cop's instincts is he did something. He is guilty of something, so we should chase it down. It's kind of a rather classic scenario that gets a lot of people in trouble. Let's face it. In real life, a lot of people get in trouble when they didn't have to because they get nervous and run from the police. You ever watch some of the those, you know, police chase videos? And a good number of the times they find out that, like, the person has no warrants, there's no weed or anything in the car. There's nothing. They just get really nervous and they run, and therefore they get the 5-year sentence for something, for literally nothing, because they ran from a cop. So maybe that was a little bit what was happening there. Although he did just see Rick outright kill a man, very quickly kill. And Rick does have that look in his eye like, okay, well, you guys blew it. I'm just going to kill you all. And you could see for a second that Rick was kind of planning on doing that. But the really interesting thing is when he chases this guy, he runs out into... I guess they really did kill all the walkers that were left in that area. Chases him out into a yard that's full of walkers, and this closes the door on the guy, and rather nonchalantly... Not nonchalantly... Poor use of the term there. Just kind of leaves him, and it's interesting how he kind of runs through that in his mind. If that's like him, I guess, slowly coming on down from the Tomas killing, because yeah, he killed Tomas directly. This guy, he's not killing directly. He's just closing the door and, you know, run, escape, go, run, you know. But he's, I guess, giving him a slight chance of survival, and then I guess by the time he walks back and he gets the other two prisoners, he's more willing to let them live. I guess it's a bit of a slow decline we see him kind of go through from that rage high of when he killed Tomas. Still, it seems like the guy did not deserve it. Let's see here. So this will be interesting how they play off with those two remaining prisoners. Again, we haven't had much character with them, but I gotta imagine they're slowly gonna get combined into the group because now there's only two of them, and the one guy seems like I think he said he just does drugs. That's why he's there. The other guy just kind of robs stuff, and that's why he's there. Crimes that are, people that have issues, but in this type of world situation, there's not really any drugs being out there for this one guy to smoke up, and there's really nothing to steal. You acquire stuff for the group, so I could see these guys kind of coming into the fold eventually. That at some point they're going to realize, either kind of get to know people, and they'll bring these two guys into the group fold proper. If for no other reason, then you kind of do need some more characters. And they had their fun killing off most of the prisoners now. Well, I suppose we'll get into. Well, there's three things I think we need to get into. One, we'll talk directly here about. We might as well talk about Laurie, since I already talked about her reaction with Carl. And the great line is when Rick kind of was telling her about the prisoners, and she kind of says, "If you have to kill him, you have to kill him." And he's like, "You say that now," and right there you're like, "Oh, Rick, you know what we think." Great writing on the part of the writers of the show, knowing how the vast majority of the fans had just their thoughts of Laurie, and when put in this situation, in order to make Rick more likable to the audience, to kind of give him the same voice that we've all had for Laurie with her double standard bullshit. And maybe they're attempting to redeem her by kind of agreeing, well, I'm not Mother of the Year, trying to defend herself a bit, but nope, no, we don't like her. But we like Rick for his reaction, his little line, calling her out that she's kind of very hypocritical, that she'll tell him he should do stuff, but when she actually is faced with the reality of what he's done, even though she was telling him to do it, she's horrified and rejects him and yells at him. So I think that was a great character moment for the audience's sake. It's an interesting kind of level of writing where you have to work with the audience, and in writing a long time show like this, where you have interaction from the audience and you kind of learn what they liked and what they didn't like, you can nod directly at the audience, or at least write a character now who's agreeing with the audience overall, so that a character you want to be liked by the audience becomes more liked. So I'm glad to see that. And it was just really good because I think everyone wants kind of Laurie called out on that. Hopefully one day she will be eaten. We can only hope. The other thing we're going to talk about here is, of course, Herschel. He's apparently survived. I hope they give him a peg leg and a pirate hat. I want this. And no one sent me a picture yet from last week's request. I know, I should get off my own lazy ass and Photoshop my own picture of Herschel the pirate. Though, mark my words, if they do give him a peg leg, there will be memes out there. 4chan will not sit still on that opportunity. But I'm very glad he survived. And they actually did get me a bit with the scare when she's giving him the CPR to live, and he kind of grabs her almost like zombie, like, oh, I really was kind of hoping there for a second. It's like, oh yes, Herschel zombie takes out Laurie. Glorious way. Herschel turns into a zombie. The only person he kills as a zombie is the one person everyone wants dead as a zombie. Great job, Herschel. You're the man that keeps on giving. Unfortunately, fortunately he survived. But I mean, come on, Herschel. You could have still snapped her neck or something. Come on. But I'm glad he survived. It does solve a little bit of the drama with the baby coming. So he might not be up to actually delivering the baby himself now, but at least he can kind of walk Carol through how to do it. And speaking of Carol, we have the last point to make is we have that weird POV shot where Carol, has got the zombie that she's going to start practicing on. Which, by the way, that Rule 34. Somebody's masturbated to that scene by now, and that's very sad. I'm sorry if I'm talking a little graphically there, but she kind of pulls up and the zombie has panties on him, like thinking there, like somewhere somebody is beating off to this right now. And I know that is the case because there exists a Left 4 Dead porn out there. So there is zombie porn. Oh, dear Lord. But she's doing her little experiment. We get that weird point of view. Now, I think, and this is kind of the reveal, is I think that might be that might be Meryl. If it is Meryl, it's like how did he find them in the prison? Now, it might not be him, so I actually shouldn't try to bring up plot holes for something that it might not be, but it's very interesting. That is kind of my speculation right now, that it's Meryl. I don't think it's Michonne or Andrea. They don't seem like they'd be close enough, but maybe, hey, maybe. I, the part of the comics that I've read were the latter part of the prison's saga, story arc, whatever you want to call it. So I'm not as familiar with the beginning of the prison arc. So maybe that's Meryl, though, is confirmed to be in next episode. If you see the previews, he looks like he's kind of joined up with the governor's group and is working with them or for them. So it'll be some interesting things to see exactly what his role is, or if somebody else is observing the prison. It's going to be very interesting to see what's going on there. Who is that POV shot of? Because you don't throw like a POV shot like that at the end of the episode like that. It's one thing, you might do that if she's like earlier on, like a sense of creepiness, like somebody's watching her. But there, that seems to be more like indicating somebody new. So maybe we'll get somebody new to the group. Or maybe it's Meryl. Or maybe it's somebody else, like one of the governor's men, realizing that, hey, there's guys in this prison. So it'll be interesting to see. And of course, next episode is going to be very interesting to finally be introduced to the governor, character that many people have been anticipating. I certainly am. I'm very curious to see how they're going to have him portrayed, how he runs his organization, and how we kind of start treating him as a villain. Because he's supposed to be an antagonist. So what is it that is making us want to agree that he should be opposed? Is the big question. Because ostensibly he's being very, very successful as a survivor. He's gathering individuals to join him. He might be a little heavy-handed, but even Rick's heavy-handed, as we've seen in this episode. So what's going to be the point that's going to tell us, the audience? Now, sometimes authors fail. Authors, writers, both fail at making us think people are villains. Like they're villains because the writer tells us that they're supposed to be villains, but that's it. And you're like, why? This is especially true in the zombie apocalypse, and I think it's getting a little better now, but it used to be a trope is, the government's evil because they're doing all these heavy-handed actions to try to stop the zombie plague from spreading. And I think it took a while for writers to realize that the audience was actually agreeing with the government. The go in and kill every living thing in the area. Like, oh my god, the government's evil, they're gonna nuke this city, there's still like a handful of survivors, and the audience of zombie fans always sits back and like, that's a really good fucking idea. For what, 20 people? Hell no, this is way too much risk. Nuke the sucker. In fact, use 2 missiles, double blast the fucker. Which is why I think 28 weeks later is a little bit better, just because it doesn't show like the government, the bad guys, for kind of they wind up having to like even shoot civilians and stuff. You kind of agree, but that is a discussion for another day. Literally, I think tomorrow I'm going to be starting my Halloween reviews, and we're going to be starting with some zombie films. I'm going to be going over some of my collection of zombie movies leading up to Halloween, trying to do a review a day. I've already talked a little bit of my speculation for next week. We're rounding it up here about 30 minutes, so wow, I'm impressed with any of you guys that listen. You watch an hour-long episode of The Walking Dead. Most of you probably then stayed and watched The Talking Dead, and now you listen to a half-hour review. If you've gotten to this point, you are a hardcore Walking Dead fan. Or you really like my voice for some reason, which is not what most people say. Or you've put this on play and you forgot it was on because the microphone is mute, or your speakers are mute. One of those 3, most likely. So please leave some feedback, subscribe, like, If you enjoyed the video, feel free to check out any of my other reviews on my channel, 3 Marless movies and game reviews. Speaking of game reviews, I do have game reviews and zombies. I do have Resident Evil 6. I've been trying to play it. I've been extremely busy. I've really haven't had more than like 2.5 hours to sit down and play. I'm going to try to play it as much as possible and post a review by the end of the week. It might be an incomplete review, but stay tuned. You should be seeing a Resident Evil 6 review coming out. Don't want to say what I'm thinking of right now because, only have 2 hours in. Let me at least finish one of the campaigns. Alright, signing off for now, guys. Hasta luego. And remember, shoot him in the head.